All right, folks, welcome back. Another episode of Zurich Times, 2019, January 23rd, 2019. And we bring you another episode in this series that is part of the testimony. We started with the Solaris Blue Raven. You don't have to necessarily agree with everybody's lifestyle to be, even hear someone's testimony. And so this is an exercise in discernment, and this is an exercise in giving you the information, and you have to use your judgment and your powers of discernment to figure out what's going on. But in the end times, this is what was happening in the realm of techno-Luciferianism. We were dealing with remote neural monitoring versus remote neural manipulation. What's the difference? Here is a targeted individual, BRYAN TEW, giving his testimony, and you will not believe it. There is a 9-3 connection right there in the first minute. So enjoy, watch this, and this is important testimony in these end times when we're dealing with techno-Luciferianism and dark overlords using technology against humanity.
Hi, this is BRYAN TEW in San Diego, California. It's April 17th, 2018. It's 9:30 in the morning. I want to talk more about this technology because, they can force the victim to speak or act, but that's not how the technology is designed to work. And they often do force the victim to engage in undesirable or unwanted actions or verbal sequences or visual sequences. The system can overpower your impulses. It can use torture and trauma to disrupt your continuity of thought or erase short-term memory so that you cannot think straight, so that you make mistakes. That's how they set you up. But I want to talk about the technology, and they don't force you. Now, they don't force you to do anything. Now, they can. The system can force you by overpowering your impulses. But that doesn't help further their technology unless they're trying to set the victim up. It doesn't really, or force the victim into some type of action or access sequence to kill, set up and frame, or mind hobble the victim. It really doesn't help their technology. So people want to know, well, how can they force me to do things against my will? Well, in order to understand that, you have to understand the difference between remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation. People often say, remote neural monitoring and mind control, they often equate the two together. They're not the same at all. Remote neural monitoring is not mind control. Remote neural manipulation is mind control. Okay, big difference. Remote neural monitoring is actually an actual military defense system using satellite tower-based platforms, mobile-based platforms, by way of they're basically relay devices. These tower satellites and mobile platforms are relay devices. These by electro-optics, virtual interfaces, and so forth, brain-to-computer interface, electronic brain-to-brain interface. This is how the technology is designed to work, and they utilize microwaves. It's easier to understand if you think of laser imaging and tracking. Okay, those type of systems. Basically, they're using remote neural monitoring is designed to image and measure and transmit brain and neural activity. That's the simple definition of it. It's much more complicated than that. So what happens is, a computer multiplexer routes the signal to a tower, satellite, or mobile platform. It's all done remotely. Okay, that's why my ears are ringing. My head and ears is in constant pulsating pain, 24 hours a day, every day. Okay, for many years. Since I was switched from state-of-the-art mind control to trauma-based mind control in 2011, these are universal effects. The tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, the pulsating pain. This is a universal effect that trauma-based mind control people suffer from. Well, it's deployed by way of a computer multiplexer, routing the signal to a tower, satellite, or mobile platform. Again, those are the three platforms, which then routes to those three platforms, which then relay those three platforms. The tower, satellite, or mobile platform then relays the signal to the digital receiver, similar to how cell phone technology works. I'll keep driving this home in all my videos so people understand how the technology is deployed in case they don't watch my other videos. So again, it's a computer multiplexer. A computer multiplexer. Okay, you're being attacked by a supercomputer. Okay, your brain is remotely tied. The cerebral cortex is remotely tied to a supercomputer for life, which monitors and manipulates all electromagnetic activity of the victim's brain. That's how mind control works. Yes, there are hive mind teams involved with many targets, many victims for the purposes of training, research, and development, and they can manually inject when they need to. But most of the torture and the assassinations is done by a supercomputer. You cannot compromise. You cannot negotiate. You cannot surrender to a computer. It will continue to do what it is programmed to do, torture and kill. Okay? It's just how the technology is designed to work. So understand that this supercomputer is using a computer multiplexer, which is routing the signal to a tower, satellite, or mobile platform. Then the tower, satellite, or mobile platform relays the signal to the digital receiver, similar to how cell phone technology works. So the digital receiver is tracked and pinpointed in real time, just like a cell phone, because this technology is dependent upon timing and location. Except with CIA and DI mind control technologies, the digital receiver is not a phone, it's a human brain. The brain of the victim has been digitalized by the nanotechnology inside of it. The nanotechnology is in the bodies, the brains of all 318 million Americans. Everyone's infected. They've been spraying the nanotechnology into the hydrosphere for the last 25 years, which filters down into the water supply and the food chain. Once ingested, the nanotech then migrates to the brain and adheres to the neurotransmitters of the victim's brain and begins to speak to and decode those neurotransmitters after it's activated. It can be activated, the nanotechnology, from thousands of miles away using a process called directed energy flashing photons. Okay, they illumine the brain of the victim with photons. They read the return training signal. That's how the technology can be activated in a specific target's brain. Okay, so while everyone is infected, not everyone's nanotech and everyone's brain is activated. Okay, so that's the simple definition. That's the simple definition of how the technology is designed to work. Now, again, it's much more complicated than that. So this supercomputer that's targeting the victim actually a system of computers, of conscious computers with a will, intellect, and emotion of their own. Now, it's really not their own. It's the it's the bioalgorithms which make up the bioalgorithms which make up the will, intellect, and emotion of those that they've copied and destroyed. Mind transfer, mind copying, whole brain emulation, etc., for the purposes of training, research, and development. Those algorithms, those machine learning algorithms, the system then takes those algorithms and correlates communication and behavior data. When I say communication and behavior data, what I'm referring to is impulses and identifiers. Okay, and then that brain activity is then sampled, remotely measured, and then integrated back into RNM data for the purposes of creating a cognitive model of the victim's brain. So the victim is tied to this system of conscious computers. It's not just one computer, okay? Remotely by way of this bidirectional stream of electromagnetic low frequency waves specifically tuned to the brainwave signature of the victim. Okay, it's called the information and injection feedback loop. It's bidirectional, so they can upload, download at the speed of light. The system can, the supercomputer can. This information and injection feedback loop, this neural link between the victim's brain and the supercomputer. Okay, the RNN system then remotely monitors and measures all electromagnetic activity of the victim's brain for life until the victim's death, cold-blooded murder. This is called transcranial brain stimulation. It's done to map out and reverse engineer the will, intellect, and emotion by reverse engineering using physical and psychological trauma to reverse engineer the sensory and neural pathways of the victim's brain and central nervous system as the system attempts to map out each vector of the victim's emotional state. It's a bidirectional stream of photons. Okay, and this bidirectional stream of photons is used to stimulate neural activity, or I should say electromagnetic activity inside the neural pathways of the victim's brain. The hive mind teams can read the return training signal in real time as well, because each hive mind team, which generally consists of no more than 3 people. You get too many people involved in a hive mind, it becomes schizophrenic. The communication, etc. Generally, no more than 3 to 6. Generally, just 3 people. Okay, it depends on the target, really. But understand that it can be accomplished from thousands of miles away. They don't need to be next to the victim. That's a common misunderstanding of how the technology is deployed. They think that people, and they often, can't get next to the victim because line of sight is necessary for the purposes of verification, etc. But this, system of conscious computers that the victim is remotely tied to for life are automated, active, and adaptive. It's an automated, active, and adaptive system of remote neural networks. And so the RNM system routes the hidden this signal, this hidden carrier frequency, okay, that's specifically tuned to the brainwave signature of the victim, to the digital receiver of the victim's brain. And then that stream of energy interfaces with the nanotechnology inside of it, and that's how the nanotechnology speaks to and decodes the neurotransmitters of the victim's brain. It's very important, okay, because this is how basically they turn the brain of the victim into their very own visual, verbal, and auditive communication system. It takes time. It didn't happen overnight, but that's what they're doing. They're turning the brains of their victim, okay, into their very own specific visual, verbal, and auditive communication system. It's dependent upon timing and location, and we're talking about 3-dimensional geolocation. But timing is more important because it's more difficult for people to understand. What I mean by timing is, location is rather simple, but timing is more complicated to understand. What I mean is that the stream of energy must run in sync with the brainwave signature of the victim, alpha, beta, delta, theta. So the correct phase, frequency, and amplitude of the stream of energy is crucial, absolutely crucial. For the the correct modulation is absolutely crucial for their technology to be effective. Otherwise, the technology doesn't work. That's why mental shielding is so incredibly effective at defeating mind control technology. Mental shielding, such as listening to pleasing music, multitasking, spontaneity, redirection, quenching, learning to read active memory, controlling the verification process. All of these are forms of mental shielding. What it does is it disrupts the return training signal, which their technology is dependent upon. Again, what happens is, what the simple definition of what's happening is they're illuminating the brain of the victim with the stream of energy, photons, okay, and then they're reading the return training signal. Remember, it's bidirectional, okay? So that's, I tell people all the time, I say, you need to learn to mentally shield. There are four forms of shielding from this technology. 4 forms. There are many ways to shield, okay? But from this technology, there are only 4, and no more than 4. Okay, there is. Sorry, my mind just went blank. There's passive shielding, chemical shielding, mental shielding, and what's called electronic jamming. Okay, electronic jamming is the only method that we know that works for sure. Unfortunately, we simply can't do it. It's not possible because we don't have the hardware and the software, and if we did, we don't have the expertise to operate such sophisticated and advanced computer systems. These are supercomputers, extremely sophisticated and advanced supercomputers, that are targeting the victim with this hidden carrier frequency, the stream of energy containing the hidden carrier frequency, the signal. Okay, I hear people on these, on conference calls and other such nonsense where they say, "I went to Home Depot and bought a electromagnetic energy measuring device." Well, that's just nonsense. You're dealing with a hidden carrier frequency. You couldn't measure it with such an over-the-counter. You can't go to these stores. You would need an electromagnetic spectrum analyzer, state of the art, okay, millions of dollars, okay, for such a piece of equipment to even isolate the signal. And even then, you'd have to isolate it at speed of light in real time because the system is designed to be automated, active, and adaptive. So, just isolating the signals isn't enough. You would have to be able to shield, to electronically jam. You would have to be able to determine that because these system of conscious computers that's targeting the victim is programmed with these hyper game theory algorithms to counter at speed of light. Whatever you're able to do, the victim's able to do to shield, they counter that at speed of light, simply by modulation of the phase frequency and amplitude. That's why passive shielding is so ineffective. You can't use passive materials to shield from an active system. It's just not going to work. I'm not saying people shouldn't shield using passive materials. Superconductor materials properly assembled, grounded with its own ventilation system, cooling system, etc., would theoretically block the signal. But such materials are too difficult to obtain and too expensive. And in any event, even if you were able to block the signal, they would just send their goon squads in to tear it up by some other means, electromagnetic pulse of energy or whatever. So, what the hive mind teams are using patterns. They're using pattern recognition. They're mapping patterns with impulses and identifiers. They're linking descriptions with data captured about the memory references of the victim to map out the victim's brain. Okay, this supercomputer is doing it all. Okay, that's what's happening. The disorienting system, the system of conscious computers, is locking on to the emotional state of the victim, and anything which interferes with that, any type of external interference which dampens the neural link, they must minimize or stop, and they use trauma to do it. They use pain stimulus. They use like they destroyed my hearing because I was using pleasing music, Christian music, to break brain entrainment with the system. The music was entraining my brain away from the visual and verbal entrainments of the RNM supercomputer. Injected subconsciously into my brain to keep my brain entrained to the system 24 hours a day. Well, they weren't going to allow that. The system is designed to counter that, and so it destroyed my hearing at higher levels. I have severe acoustic trauma. I have severe distortion at higher levels, and that's represented in the audio-video content placed back at higher levels. So they destroy the hearing of the victim at higher levels, so that the video and audio content is so severely distorted it's painful to listen to, and therefore no longer pleasing in nature, therefore no longer constitutes a dominant external stimulus, therefore no longer entrains the brain of the victim away from the visual and verbal entrainments of the system to that stimuli, dominant external stimuli, which would work, except that it's now no longer pleasing in nature because it's so severely distorted. So basically, the system locks on to the emotional state, and anything which interferes with that, they've got to stop and minimize. In other words, the system is designed to predict, and it's wholly dependent, absolutely dependent upon its ability to predict and influence the reference choices of the victim during thought composition. When I say thought composition, I mean as you're formulating your thoughts and preparing to act. When I say reference choices, I'm referring to memories, short-term and long-term memories that the system was able to capture and is now remotely injecting back into the subconscious of the victim at regular intervals in order to pitch the victim in some type of action or access sequence to deceive and manipulate the victim, usually some type of verbalization or related activity. Verbalization or related activity is an important form of verification. They need to verify that the technology is working effectively. So the system is designed to predict and influence. I'm talking about the difference between remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation. And if you need to look at this video and listen to this video over and over, I encourage you to do so, because the technology is kind of sophisticated. I'm making it simple. It's much more sophisticated than this. Try reading the books of the scientists that explain the technology. Try talking to those scientists. It's very difficult to understand them. So I'm simplifying it. I'm making it as simple as possible for people to understand. This is why, mental shielding, disrupts the verification process with remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation, because they, in order to verify that their technology is working effectively, they need to visually see, or either what they can guess based on the past activity of the victim, or visually see the victim in real time respond, to verbally respond, or to engage in a related action or access sequence. And I'm saying, for example, something related to either speech or behavior related to the remote neural attack in real time. Okay, so the verification process breaks apart without the victim's the victim's response to whatever stimuli they're using. These situational and conversational scenarios are designed to determine the effectiveness of the neural programming at night. So they'll use triggers. And when I say triggers, I mean images, objects, symbols, words, etc. Colors. These are triggers. They're trying to trigger the memory anchors to determine if the victim will respond, if the technology is working properly. So integration completion between the system and the victim's brain is dependent upon that. Okay, and without the victim's response to that specific stimuli, whatever they're using, okay, whatever remote neural attack, whatever memory reference, whatever impulse injection they're using, okay, without the victim's response to that specific situational and conversational scenario they're trying to solicit an emotional response from the victim for, then the verification process breaks apart and mind control fails. People need to understand that verification is a crucial part of remote neural monitoring, remote neural manipulation, RNM technology. So what I'm saying is these are thought-triggered attacks. What I'm saying is the system is designed to attack you in real time. What do I mean by thought-triggered attacks? What I mean is the system is designed to remotely capture random bits of your senses. Any set of brainwaves, once the victim's brain is hooked up to the system remotely, okay, bidirectionally, any set of brainwaves can then be copied, held, downloaded, held, and then replayed over and over, perpetually in the victim's mind. Repetition is torture. That's why Chinese water torture was so effective. Repetition is torture. So the system is designed to remotely capture. When I say thought-triggered attacks, now this is what I'm talking about. This is a crucial element of mind control technology. Okay, thought-triggered attacks are basically dependent upon the system's ability to remotely capture random bits of your senses, of your thoughts, emotions, etc., and in real time. Okay, and then at speed of light, download that. Okay, and then to inject with fabricated stories, mental suggestions based upon whatever it was able to capture. So if you start thinking about chocolate, it'll start injecting with fabricated memories of chocolate, fabricated stories, mental suggestions about chocolate to pitch you into some type of action or access sequence involving chocolate. So you start thinking about chocolate ice cream. Well, it doesn't want you to. It wants to see the technology is working properly. They want to be able to manipulate you, deceive and manipulate you. So, there'll be chocolate chip cookies that'll inject with some type of mental suggestion, some type of fabricated story. These are thought-triggered attacks, remote neural attacks, designed to modify the active memory of the victim, okay, to control the victim, okay. So, training, research, and development, that's what this is about. So, the system will remotely attack at speed of light with thought-triggered attacks, injecting chocolate chip cookies, chocolate pudding, different mental suggestions regarding chocolate. They don't care anything about chocolate. What they care about is their technology, okay? I'm just using chocolate as an example. Could be religion, could be sex, could be whatever they think you will respond to. What it will be is what they know you will respond to, okay? So, people need to understand the difference between remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation. So I'm going to make it real simple. I'm going to say it again, real simply. Remote neural monitoring is the system's ability to catalog, to collect and to catalog your memory references, to collect and to catalog the victim's memories. To collect and catalog data regarding the memory references of the victim. Okay, whatever you're thinking about. Okay, to download that at speed of light, to catalog it, to integrate it back into R&M data. That's remote neural monitoring. Okay, so remote neural monitoring occurs in stages. You have what's called formulation. Basically, again, that's the collection and cataloging of data regarding your memory references. You have what's called the next stage of remote neural monitoring is called predictive integration. And predictive integration is basically an interpretation of that data. Okay, so the interpretation of data regarding your memory references. So whatever the remote neural manipulation was designed to achieve, they need to be able to monitor that and to download that and to verify that. That's part of remote neural monitoring. It's called predictive integration. Okay, so again, what the system is doing is it's mapping patterns. It's mapping your memory patterns. It's decoding thought patterns, okay? It's downloading electromagnetic emission patterns of your brain. It's called pattern recognition. It's using impulses and identifiers. And when I say impulses and identifiers, what I mean is synaptic responses of your brain, okay? Whole brain emulation. They're breaking your brain down to the synaptic level. They're to determine your composition habits, to match your composition habits with those impulses and identifiers. Behavior, to predict how you're going to think or act. Otherwise, I can't verify their technology. There's simply no way for them to verify their technology. So as you're beginning to formulate your thoughts and you're preparing to act, that's when the system attacks. They're attempting to modify your active memory. Now, long-term memory management is part of it. Neuroprogramming, dream modulation, neurolinguistic programming, etc. That's part of long-term memory management. I'm specifically referring to active memory, short-term memory here. The system is designed to modify, to achieve modification of the active memory of the victim. Basically, memory is a big area. You have residual memory, you have active memory. I'm just going to make it real simple. You have short-term memory and long-term memory. Short-term memory is anything less than 30 seconds. Long-term memory is anything longer than 30 seconds. So the R&M system is attempting to modify the victim's short-term memory, the active memory of the victim. And so the statistical data that they're able to get back from the remote neural monitoring, it's called response statistics. Remember, the system is designed to provoke you emotionally. The situational and conversational scenario, street theater, the organized talking, etc., the gaslighting, all that designed to provoke you emotionally into emotional responses which can be remotely measured, identified, developed, and remotely measured and integrated back into R&M data. Those response statistics, they have to correlate all those responses in what they call response statistics. That's what I'm talking about when I'm referring to statistical data. Okay, I'm referring to response statistics. So, it depends either on the victim's ignorance of the fact he's being targeted in this way, and a person who knows they're being targeted can still be fooled, deceived, and manipulated. Because the technology is designed to mimic the normal cognitive behavior of the victim. Or either on the victim's ignorance of the fact they're targeted in this way, or on the victim's cooperation. That's why it's so dangerous to cooperate. You never want to cooperate. If they can't determine that based on what they visually see on their virtual screen, on the virtual interface, then they have to revert back to the victim's past activity in order to be able to predict in advance, predict and influence the reference choices of the victim during thought composition. Thought composition as you're formulating your thoughts, preparing to act. Choice references, that's memories. Okay, anytime you think of something, it becomes memory the moment you think of it. Short-term memory, long-term memory, remember. Okay, they're targeting your short-term memory. There are ways I've talked about, to defeat, this technology. The problem is, it's just too complicated a lot of times for people to understand. Without consistent responses from the victim, either the victim needs to become dependent upon the system, or they need to be able to determine if the victim's responses are consistent or not. And without consistent response statistics, there's no way for the system, the R&M supercomputers, which are attacking you, to use those previous choice references, memories, okay, to use those that they captured during the silent monitoring period against you. But that's what I mean when I say, it's injecting remotely the memories of the victim. They're using your own memories against you. Whether it's short-term memory or long-term memory, whether it just happened a few seconds ago or a few years ago, they're using your own memories against you that the system was able to capture during the silent monitoring period. Any set of brainwaves can be captured, held, and replayed perpetually in the victim's brain over and over. Okay, so basically, what happens is it injects those same memories back into the subconscious of the victim during normal activity, during normal thought activity. Remember, it's targeting your memory and thought process to convince you that the response was your own. Well, you automatically identify with that memory. It's your own memory, so you think, well, that's my memory and thought process. Problem is, it's no longer just your memory. It's a fabricated memory. Okay, fabricated and falsified memories. Fabricated memories are your own real memories. They're using against you. Fabricated memories are memories they were able to layer in with the neuroprogramming, dream modulation, neurolinguistic programming. So that's what I'm talking about when I say neuroprogramming. What they need you to do is, after they're able to determine, after they're able to try and convince you that the responses are your own, they need you to complete or describe that reference, that memory, okay, by making the appropriate, verbalization of related action. That's verification. Okay, that's the verification process. They need you to, that's why it's so important they establish line of sight, either electronically or visually, okay? And they have ways of doing it. I mean, the technology, people think they're using cameras. They're not using cameras. They're using telemetry. Cameras, it's just too difficult to maintain and operate such systems. I'm not saying they don't use cameras. They do, okay? But they're using other forms of surveillance, such as extremely sophisticated forms of surveillance, such as telemetry, where they're able to use microwaves to illuminate the entire house of a victim, for example, and turn the victim's walls of the house into glass. They can see inside in 3D color, everything that's happening. They can hear everything that's happening. It's called telemetry. So the system is basically designed to constantly attack you with torture, directed energy torture, sleep deprivation torture, etc., to disrupt your continuity of thought and to erase short-term active memory. That's how this technology is designed to work. And uses sleep deprivation torture, for example, or directed energy torture to torture the victim into near incoherency, where the victim can no longer recognize modification of their active memory and fight back against the system's influences. That's how the technology is designed to work. So the simple definition of remote neural monitoring and remote neural manipulation is just that. Cataloging and collecting data regarding your memory references, that's remote. Now, it's much more complicated than that. I'm making it simple. Remote neural monitoring is the cataloging and collecting and cataloging of data regarding your memory references. Memories. Remote neural manipulation is the ability of the system to predict and influence your memories during thought composition, your active memory, your short-term memory, to deceive and manipulate you, to pitch you into some type of action or access sequence. So this R&M supercomputer is basically monitoring and manipulating all electromagnetic activity of your brain 24 hours a day. It uses physical and psychological trauma to map out and reverse engineer, again, the sensory and neural pathways of the victim's brain and central nervous system as it builds this cognitive model to one day, complete and achieve direct behavioral control over the victim. People don't understand that the system can fool you. The system, you need to understand. You need to have a basic understanding of the technology and understanding the memory attacks, blocking your real memories. That's what memory management is. That's the second category of mind control. All mind control falls into three categories: censorship, memory management, direct behavioral control. Well, memory management is just blocking your real memories and injecting with fabricated and falsified memories. But the ability of the victim to identify that it's happening is key. It's called reading active memory. Because if you can't read active memory, if you can't identify that these remote neural memory attacks are happening, then there's no way for you to be able to defeat the system, to recognize modification of your active memory and to fight back against the system's influences. Last night and this morning, it was targeting me with dizziness. Now this response, this video becomes the pattern for the next wave of torture, so they'll continue this, okay? Because why? They need to generate patterns. Pattern recognition, decoding thought patterns, that's mind control, okay? In order for them to be able to determine, to generate patterns, they need to force the victim into a pattern of behavior or a pattern of responses to the torture and trauma. So the last response of the victim becomes the pattern for the next wave of torture, the next wave of harassment. They must create patterns, force the victim into patterns of behavior and responses, patterns of speech, okay? That's how the technology works. It's constantly using torture to disrupt my continuity of thought. It's just impossible to function and survive normally when you're, constantly tortured all day, every day. Mild, moderate, or severe, designed to disrupt your continuity of thought, erase short-term active memory constantly, so that to de-pattern the brain so that it can re-pattern. Okay, this is BRYAN TEW. This is April 17th, 2017. Excuse me, 18. See, it's hard. My memory's shot. April 17th, 2018. It's about it's 10 o'clock in the morning. San Diego, California.